So I am Erica Goodnight. I am the president and CEO of Union Grove Lumber. Very happy to be with you guys again this year. Last year we discussed allocation because that was a big question that everyone had with COVID. So we went over how allocation works. We're going to kind of touch on that a little bit more this time. But the question that has been coming up all the time, even before COVID, how is lumber priced? What's it doing? Where's it going? And I wish we all had a crystal ball so that we would all know what lumber is going to do, because futures are where, you guys can save money for sure. If you knew what the future was going to do, you would know whether to buy now or wait and buy later. But we're going to go over really how lumber is priced in general. There's not a whole lot of information on futures, but I can share with you kind of how futures can be generated in your own office. Before I get started, I would like to introduce you to our team that's here with us at the Shed Show this year, or Shed Expo. I'm sorry, I called it Shed Show for so many years. At the Expo this year. So we have Sammy Lale, so he's our sales director. So a lot of you guys talk to him. Next, we have my husband. This is Josh Goodnight. So he's the vice president and COO. Next, we have Kimberly Tomlin. She is also in sales and has the gift of gab. So y'all, anyone who calls in the office and talks to her always enjoys their phone call. And then we have Lauren Walker. She actually does all of the buying for Union Grove Lumber. So she has a large job. If anyone can talk on this topic, it's probably her, but she's not going to get up here and talk. So I did use her knowledge for a lot of this. And then last but not least, coming out of retirement for the show is Mo Lunsford. He is in the house. We're all excited that he's back, and I'm extra nervous doing this presentation because he's sitting here. So it'll all work, but he's the most judgmental of us all. So if I say something incorrect, don't worry, he'll speak up and correct me. So y'all will all be walking away warm and fuzzy that the seminar went as anticipated. Okay, so market numbers. How is lumber priced? Okay, so we're going to go over these 4 contributing factors. We're going to go over them one by one and go into detail on all of them because all 4 things turn the wheel of lumber pricing. Different mills use different strategies, so I'm not really going to speak to one specific mill today. I will speak kind of how different species of wood prices differently. However, these things all roll together. A lot of you probably think that random lengths just drives the truck, and it doesn't. But we are going to talk about random lengths. We're going to talk how they get their numbers, why they're used or why sometimes they're not used. We're going to go into market cofactors. That's a big one. That talks about politics. That talks about the environment. There's so many cofactors that go into pricing lumber. We're going to go into contractual volume. So mills use the word contractual volume. Union Grove Lumber uses the word allocation. We use it interchangeably, so y'all can use that interchangeably as well. Then the last one is fuel and freight. That's something that has really affected us this year. It has fallen off of the affecting platform a little bit, but we're going to go into why that it goes beyond an 18-wheeler, okay? All right, so the first contributing factor, random lengths. The history of random, it began in the 1950s, so it's been around for a while. However, most mills have been around longer. So it's just a group of folks that came together and wanted to provide our industry with what they say is unbiased, consistent, and timely reports of the market activity, trends, issues, and analysis. As you see here, they do not say futures, okay? So whenever you guys call in and you're like, well, what's futures? Nobody's reporting futures. They do, however, report on issues and trends, okay? Now, unbiased, we'll talk about that in a few more slides, but that's up for debate, whether or not Random Lengths is unbiased. They don't pull everybody. They don't call Union Grove Lumber in their weekly reporting and say, what'd you do this week? So is it really unbiased? Because they don't have time or the ability to contact everyone that trades lumber. And I know for a fact that they don't call all the mills. So we'll go over a little bit of that too. The current editor is Sean Church, and he has been the editor with them since 1990. So he's seen a lot of changes. And I will say, Random Lengths during COVID did a good job of trying to keep everyone informed of what's going on in the world. And a few times they have a little blurb on the front page. And a lot of times it was like, hold on for your seatbelts. We don't know what's coming next, because that's how we all felt during those times. Okay, so Random publishes on Tuesdays and Fridays. So Tuesday is what we consider midweek. And a lot of you know midweek because you'll call in and say, what did midweek do? But midweek, we don't actually talk about those numbers until Wednesday. So it publishes Tuesday evening. It kind of gives us a foresight of Wednesday start, all right? And then it also publishes Friday evenings, but then that starts Monday. So you've got Tuesday and Friday, but we publish Wednesday and Monday. Prices are FOB. I know some of you also have said, what is FOB? Well, FOB literally means freight on board, and it's the point where the seller relinquishes ownership. So for most folks reading Random, it's at the mill. That's where the seller, the mill, whoever we're buying from, relinquishes their ownership, and then we take ownership of the material at that point. So Random goes and they price Southeast, Midwest, there's all these different regions because that depends on where the mill is as far as where that price should come from. Random Lengths is only available to members of Random Lengths. You have to pay for that membership, and you have to be verified as a lumber trader. And at Union Grove Lumber, we're very transparent on Random Lengths. So anytime y'all want information about what's going on, just let us know. We're super transparent about it. The accuracy, here we go. Depends on who you talk to. This is where the bias sometimes comes in. So we talked to two friends of ours. One, Coastal Forest Products, which is now not Coastal Forest Products, but at the time, just a few weeks ago it was. So they rely heavily on Random Lengths. If I'm going to buy panels from them, they're telling me it's random plus freight. And so they rely heavily. But why? Because they are a big reporter to Random Lengths. So they feel like that their numbers that they need to produce at are adequately displayed in Random's reports, okay? But then we've got some friends at Timber Products, and they do not rely any on Random Lengths because they don't report to Random Lengths, and they don't feel that Random Lengths is very considerate of all of the picture. So you've got two ends of the spectrum. The people who report to it love it. The people who don't report to it don't really rely on it. That also goes into yellow pine versus European spruce. Yellow pine, most of the mills are reporting to it, and you can pull your bright numbers directly off of Random. Most of them rely on Random. But European spruce, Random Lengths does not have a good section at all on European spruce, especially stud lengths. You will not find 6s, 75s, 89s on Random ever. It's just not something that's published because it's not something used in a home. Random Lengths is primarily driven to contractors, people who build homes, and you guys build barns, which we need shorter lengths, but that will never be published. And so where does the European mills get those numbers from is up for debate. And that's where we have to use a lot of negotiation. Okay, so how does Random Lengths get their prices? They get it from concluded open market transactions. Okay, this is concluded. So there's two ways to get a concluded transaction in their minds. One is a true sale. So this is where a sale has been contracted, a sale has been signed, sealed, and delivered. A sale is done. It's been invoiced. That's a sale. But they also consider firm bids. So that's whenever a buyer would call into the mill and say, if you will sell me this at this price, you will have a PO in your hands. At that point, it would become a sale. But they also use firm bids, even if the mill didn't accept the bid. Okay, so I find that's interesting. Those two things, the sales and the bids, are at the mill level. Wholesalers can report on this. Distribution centers, Lowe's and Home Depot, can report. And then actually treating facilities can also report on that, because some treaters also trade lumber. Random Lengths does do the information via phone calls, or that's how they've been doing it. I think they have reached out a little bit more on the internet base, but I don't really know because they don't ask me for pricing. And the information collected is not verified by a third party. So at what point is somebody not, fudging the numbers a bit? I don't know. That's where we don't rely totally on Random Lengths for our pricing, okay? That's why it's 1/4 of the puzzle. All right. Futures. Here's your crystal ball answer. There is nothing published about futures. Random Lengths does not give you predictions or anticipations. You can do a gut feeling. You can do, on the future slides, kind of where things are going in the world otherwise. Those are things that go into futures. You can, however, pull historical data and run trend lines. A lot of folks, including us, like to look at that, especially for seasonality. If you're getting into a certain season, what was the trend in years past? And you can pull that, or you can keep up with it on your own devices, and you can run trend lines in Excel, and it can kind of show you where it anticipates that material going. But that's done privately. Random does not provide that to you. There is also hedging and risk management firms. That's a whole nother rabbit trail that we're not going to go down, but they also protect with futures. That's a whole, y'all can look into that if you ever are interested. It's an entire rabbit trail. Futures are very important, though. Whenever you guys call and ask, I know that it's important because it's equally as important to me what futures are going to do. No one wants to buy at a bad level. It's just the point in case. And for an example, I found this super interesting. So members of NALA, which Union Grove Lumber is a member of, is the North American Wholesale Lumber Association. As a whole, the whole group, every member together, carries $1.5 billion worth of inventory at all times. It's a significant amount of lumber on the ground. This means lumber sitting. And at just a 2% drop in price, which is not much. It's pennies whenever you're talking about, it's not even a penny, it's fractions of a penny whenever you're talking about each price, is a $10 million loss. Y'all, the futures affect us. Whenever y'all ask, we are equally as interested in futures, and we equally would love a crystal ball. So whenever you're talking to us about it, believe us whenever we say we're interested too. Here's what we think is happening, because we want to also project. It's what we do for a living. Okay, so that was Random Lengths. Now, we're going to dig into the market cofactors. The first market cofactor is supply and demand. We talked a lot about this last year with allocation, because allocation pricing changes as well. But if you have high supply and high demand, or if you have low supply and low demand, so where the demand and the supply match, moderate pricing. Prices are pretty stable. However, if you have really high supply, if I have a lot of wood on the ground but no demand, then people are dropping their prices to try to just push material, okay? Now the reverse also happens. If I have hardly no material on the ground, but 100 of you are calling a day for 6-foot studs, then the price goes up because I don't have much material. So it's an inverse relation there. Mood. This is a big one. And actually, just last week, you guys were able to take advantage of this number 2, the mood. If buyers are more eager than sellers, then the prices are rising. But if the seller is more eager than the buyers, the price drops. Last week on those 12-foot euros that you guys got a blast email on, I had a seller really wanting to move some wood. And so that's whenever y'all got that blast information on, I've got this many loads, I got this price, because he was eager to move it. And I love that for you guys, because I'm like, ooh, they can save some money, because it was way below market. So mood, big thing. The time of the year. This is affecting us right now. This is a huge thing with the hurricane going on in Florida. But in the summer and in the fall, you have dry conditions, which oftentimes leads to forest fires, which disrupts logging. In the winter and spring, you can have super wet conditions, which creates a soggy ground, which logging cannot happen in that either. So the environment plays a big part. With this hurricane, that plays a big part, because if the hurricane comes through and you've got to rebuild houses, or a lot of folks are, boarding up their windows, if you have that, you have a huge demand for OSB. I mean, OSB, normally whenever a hurricane comes through, you're going to see about a 6-week window of driving prices for OSB because of the weather. So the time of the year, the weather, the environment impacts lumber prices a lot. Logging, and just because of the demand, and or, God forbid, but if a mill was destroyed in a storm of any sort. All right, so then you have politics. This is also affecting us right now. So you have labor disputes. Right now, we have a mill that is in Florida that's having a huge issue with labor disputes because, as you all know, there's a lot of immigration happening in Florida. Well, a lot of these lumber mills are accepting these folks to work. Well, Florida has a law about who can work and verification. And so a lot of these folks are being pushed out of being able to work because they're going in and saying, these folks aren't legally certified to work and they're going to have to leave, and they have to. And so that affects the mill, because at that point you're losing employees. And if you don't have employees, you can't run. So labor disputes is a big issue. Import and export barriers, that in itself, especially on the European side of things. Animal rights, y'all know we talked about the hooded owl last year. That was a real thing in Oregon. And environmentalist movements. If folks are saying people are cutting down too many trees, which is never the case because we're all a part of the Sustainable Initiative for Forestry, but we have to respect those movements as well. Lastly is the banking industry. This has been the hot topic of the year as percentages keep climbing and house starts keep seeming to drop. New house starts. A typical home built in the United States uses 1/2 of a truck of lumber. It doesn't sound like much, right? But I guess it is for a typical home. So 1/2 truck of lumber. Random is reporting on this, and it's very interesting, and y'all get this information on Mondays whenever I email you, but that's where the new house starts make a difference. If new house starts fell by just 100,000 new house starts, which isn't a whole lot in the whole United States, that's 50,000 trucks of lumber. That's a lot more supply that's going to be sitting on the ground. So there's where you would anticipate for prices to drop. Now, if new house starts are climbing, which had been happening, we've seen new house starts just booming, then that means more lumber's being consumed for that, and the supply is very limited. There's where the prices go up. The U.S. dollar also is important. I think that this is crazy, but people, if you watch the stock market and just watch the U.S. dollar, as the dollar value increases, Canadian lumber prices decrease. which means the demand for the Canadian lumber increases because it's cheaper wood. But I think that that's super interesting. So if you wanted to watch something kind of different, you can watch the value of the dollar. Okay, the third piece of the 4-piece pie is contractual volumes. We call this allocation at Union Grove Lumber, but contractual volumes is what most mills call it. This is decided annually, typically September through November. That is why right now, even today, Union Grove Lumber, we're doing your 2023 buys for allocation. This helps mills, it helps us prepare for your annual needs of next year because contracts are honored over open market volumes and offers. So if you are an allocator or a contractual buyer, then your material is prioritized. If that supply gets tight, you're still going to get fed, okay? Also, a kind of fun thing about allocation or contractual volumes is those folks typically know the pricing of the month, the next month, and the month prior. So right now, the folks who allocated at Union Grove Lumber for, let's see, what month are we going into? October, knew those prices last week, which was in September. So you kind of get a one-up also on where the market is going, especially on any panel product that the prices don't really fluctuate but once a month. So prior to 2019, prices were pretty much established annually. For us, we would decide our volume of Duratemp, for an example, and we would go out to Oregon and decide our price for the whole year. That would help everybody because you guys would know how you were going to build your barn, where you're going to price it, where you would be able to make some margin, and everything was all, good and well. Since 2019, it's went to monthly pricing. A few of our distributors will do further, and some of them don't change their price as often, but monthly pricing is what is established as able to be changed. So the pricing can change monthly, and then some prices can change weekly still yet. All right, the last of the 4-piece pie is fuel and freight. So I said this goes beyond an 18-wheeler, and this is why. The first step in the whole piece of getting lumber out to you guys is logging. Logging takes a significant amount of fuel, and it's beyond the trucks. So you have to run all of the logging equipment. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the monstrosities whenever it comes to logging, but it is a lot of equipment, and it doesn't run on solar panels. It runs on fuel. And then you also have just the simple saws. I mean, the saws take fuel as well. You all have chainsaws at home, and they also don't run on the solar panels. So you've got to, remember that the fuel costs start from the time the tree's cut, or even really the time you go into the forest. The second part, though, that also uses fuel is in manufacturing. Plant operations utilizes fuel. And then I don't know if you guys knew this, but a lot of product composition has fuel or petroleum-based waxes inside the material. It creates a hydrophobic barrier, which makes it where water can't penetrate. That uses fuel. If fuel prices are going up, oil prices are going up, the price of simply making the materials going up. So that's where fuel affects that as well. In warehousing, my warehouse, personally, we go through a whole ton of fuel just in our forklifts. They all run, we have all of ours run on diesel. I know some of yours might run on propane, but that affects us as well. We have to make sure our costs are covered in simply loading and unloading trucks. Then the final one is the easy one, the transportation from the mill to our warehouse, and then from our warehouse to you guys. That's the obvious one whenever fuel is affecting us. So whenever fuel prices are going up, just remember the price is not just consumed in an 18-wheeler. The price has to be distributed because of logging, manufacturing, and warehousing as well. Those pieces of the puzzle also make a big difference. So that is all 4 pieces of the pie. Now, anybody who wants this sent to you, I'm happy to send this. This is kind of just a little bonus because a lot of you love to learn how to price per thousand. Now, we had a huge debate actually driving here as far as I prefer per thousand. Well, I prefer per each. Everybody has a different preference, but a lot of you, I think, say, well, I don't want to ask her to convert it. It's never a problem. But if you want to convert it yourself, I've made this nice little how-to map. And so you guys can learn yourselves how to take that per thousand price, which most lumber traders price you per thousand. We're happy to convert it. Don't take this as we don't want to convert it. But if you want to learn to convert yourself, you can do it these ways. And so I did you guys a dimensional section, a panel section, so anything in a 4x8 or 4x7 sheet, and then a trim section, because we all know trim is the whole name of the game these days. That's the biggest question. All right, so on the dimensional side, on all the sides, you multiply straight across. So on the dimensional, you're going to do 2 times 4 times 16. So 8 times 16, 128, and then the rest of those are there. On the panels, you kind of leave off the first fraction. How thick the panel is really doesn't matter. To us, Roseburg's rolling their eyes because they do actually care. But for all intents purposes, you just multiply the last 2 numbers. So if you've got a 4x8 sheet or a 4x7 sheet, you just multiply that. 4 times 8 is 32, or 4 times 7 is 28. And then on the trim, you go straight across. So most of you buy a 1x4, but it's really a 5/8. Again, the 5/8 doesn't matter. It all goes to a 1x4 unless you're buying a super thick trim, but none of you that I'm seeing in here do that. So you multiply it 1 times 4 times 14, so that's 56. Or if you're buying, that's for treated trim. And then if you're buying prime trim, most of that's in a 16-foot long piece, so you do 4 times 16. So that's the first step. The second step is to divide by 12, okay, on everything except for the panels. So you're going to divide the dimensional material by 12, and it goes into these weird decimals. This is also up for debate. I carry my decimal all the way out to like the 100th degree. Sammy doesn't, and so it all depends on who you talk to. Panels don't divide by 12. That's the only one. And then trim, you also divide by 12. Then you're going to multiply. Here's where your price per thousand comes in. So for an example, I was doing the dimensional at $575 per thousand, the panels at $1,230, and the trim at $1,770. These are not legitimate numbers. I just put them for an example. So that's not where pricing is right now. So don't come to me saying, well, you said 4x4 14s are $575. No, I didn't. For an example, so you would take your full, where that decimal ran on out there, that 10.6667, and you multiply it by the 575. So at this point, you're at, it looks huge, 6,133. And then on those panels, 1230. So you do the whole 1230, these big numbers. Okay, so you multiply it by your price per thousand, the whole number. And then the last step, you divide by 1,000. So this is where you get the dollar price. So the last step, dividing by 1,000 on those 2x4 16s at $575 is $613 each. On the panels, your 4x8 sheet at $1,230 1,000 is $39.36 each. Your trim, let's do the last one because y'all mostly buy primed trim, but 1x4 16 at $17.70 1,000 is $9.44 each. And then it's just like voila. But that's where it comes from. So as you do it more and more, you get really, into the habit of how to convert your numbers. But a lot of you have always asked when I thought, well, what a perfect time to explain how to price per thousand. It is simple, but it does take practice. And if you want this, if you weren't able to snap a picture and you want this sent to you, I'm happy to send this to you too. And then you can learn or teach your kids how to convert price per thousand. So that is how market numbers are generated in a nutshell. Again, no crystal balls are here. And actually, that's what I asked for my seminar to be titled, but they didn't. So I wanted it to say no crystal balls, but they wouldn't do it. So none of us know what futures are going to hold. Right now, we're all watching the storm. That's the biggest. The second biggest are labor disputes because of the immigration. So we're watching those two things right now are on my team's eyes, and I'm sure on the eyes of the mills that are present today as well. And so it should be on your minds as well. So any questions that I or anyone on my team could answer, because I might just defer a question to them and now they're all sweating. Sure. Yeah. So it's simple. You just would reverse each thing. So I'm just going to walk over here. So if you know it's 613 each, you're then, instead of dividing by 1,000, you're going to multiply by 1,000. And then the next thing you're going to do, since this one was multiplied by 575, you're going to divide by 575. And since this one was divided by 12, you would multiply by 12. And then you would actually divide by 16, divide by 4, divide by 2. It'll pop you back. So you just reverse the whole equation. So anything that says divide, multiply. Anything that says multiply, divide, and you're back. Good question. Did I answer it? You're welcome. Actually, it's really hard to do whenever you're sitting there trying to think about it and you're envisioning the equation. I'm like, just, it gets difficult. Lauren always has me do it, and I enjoy doing it, actually. Any other questions? That was an easy one to answer. I was hoping for a hard one where I just deferred a question. Sure.
How will the inflation affect the final price of the lumber?
So inflation. So that goes back to inflation has a lot to do with percent changes, and that's why the feds are changing percentage rates to try to calm things down. And so right now, the lumber prices are being affected because as the percentages increase for the banking industry loans, as those percentages increase, then the prices are affected because new home starts tend to slow down. Okay, as new house starts slow down, remember the supply, because the mills are still making product. As the supply climbs, then the demand for us, you guys, our demands pretty much stays the same. So at that point, we should be able to see some pretty good price lumber.
It's complicated. For example, our company builds sheds in North Carolina. We buy lumber all year.
Mm-hmm.
But it's complicated for us calculate the real price for the lumber because, for example, in April, we bought material, for example, 2x4 by 8 in $8.
Mm-hmm.
The inflation in 1 year is around 9%.
Mm-hmm.
And now, 4 months later, we bought the same product in 4.55.
Right.
No makes sense because the inflation hit the amount 9%. Now maybe 8.3 is the difference only half point in 4 months. It's complicated to calculate a real price. For example, for the next year, what is the real price? The same price.
Right. But look at what the interest rates have done since April with the feds. You've seen significant changes. Just last week, right, it was another 0.75%. Since April, the interest rates that the feds are putting on the banking industry to try to slow things down is what they're doing. But that has also slowed down new house starts. Okay, so the interest rates, I know you're saying inflation rate has gone down, but it's kind of inversely related. So the interest rates have gone up. So new house starts have diminished. There's excess lumber on the ground. So that's where you were able to get a better price material because you're buying whenever contractors that are building houses aren't buying. So right now, and you guys all remember, the 2008 crisis, whenever the housing market absolutely crashed. But at that point, we still did good. Y'all are still building sheds. And at that point, we had material just flowing at good prices because the mill still has, it's not going to ever be free. Everybody still has to make money. But the prices came down because they weren't trying to feed two mouths. They weren't trying to feed the contractor that builds homes and you guys that build barns. And then we're also forgetting about the do-it-yourselfers. That was the biggest issue whenever COVID came and why prices went up, because Lowe's and Home Depot was sucking every single stick that they could. They were taking all of their contract volumes plus more, and it was really killing us. And whenever you go to fight Union Grove Lumber versus Lowe's, let me tell you, it ain't easy. It is not easy, but that's where my team goes in and we fight for you guys, because at the end of the day, we're going to still be here even whenever Lowe's their material demand changes. And that's where we fight for y'all. That's true. Right. That's right. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we hope to see you on the floor. We are doing our big cash giveaway, so stop by and figure out how you can walk away with a few $100 extra in your pocket. And Dad will be there sitting on the couch chit-chatting, so come by and see him. Thank you, guys.